The time is just gone 8:29 p.m. as we continue with the show this evening. It is Wednesday night with myself, Inayet Wadee, and earlier on we had a wonderful tribute to the late Don Matera. And tomorrow an event that is taking place in the United Kingdom at the SOAS University of London, which is the School of Oriental and African Studies. And this is about the screening of Itaka. It's about a father, a family, a fight for justice, and this is a film screening and a panel discussion on the Julian Assange case. And joining us this evening is Nina Arif, who has got an MSc in International Politics. She also works at the SOAS University out in London. Nina, welcoming you to the show. Assalamu alaikum, and it's wonderful you're able to join us tonight.
Wa alaikum salam, Inayet. Thank you so much for having me this evening. It's nice to be back, and I'm not used to being on video with you because usually it was audio for me, but so it's a nice change.
Well, it certainly is, and with technology where it is at this point in time, and obviously I think we've taken full advantage of what is available to us, and we've taken our broadcasting to another level, which incorporates both video and audio. And we welcome our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms, on our YouTube channels, on Facebook as well, and also on the audio channels. Now, tomorrow's screening, I know you've been working extremely hard at it, and I've had a look at your Facebook postings and promoting this event that is taking place at 6 p.m. in London tomorrow. But before we talk about the screening and this event, let's just begin with who is Julian Assange and why is he in jail right now?
Sure. Well, some of your viewers and listeners might already be familiar with that name, but Julian Assange, he's an Australian, an editor, publisher, an activist, but more famously, he's the guy who founded WikiLeaks. That was in 2006. And WikiLeaks was a platform whereby people who had information which was newsworthy, important, people like whistleblowers could come and reveal that information to the world. So Julian Assange was the founder of WikiLeaks. And they famously published, I mean, there were so many WikiLeaks cables, but one of the most famous ones, or the most impactful one, was a video called Collateral Murder. And that's the video which showed the American Apache helicopter shooting and killing Iraqi civilians. So that's what we know Julian Assange for.
Well, certainly, and we know, it created huge discussion, and also at the same time, when one looks at the consequences of WikiLeaks and what was actually revealed, and this is the reason why, Julian Assange, obviously, he felt threatened in more ways than one, Nina.
Of course, yeah. I mean, with what I've just explained in terms of what WikiLeaks revealed, that gives you a good indication as to why he's now a wanted man. So just for people who don't know, Julian Assange is currently in London in Belmarsh maximum security prison. And he's fighting an extradition case that the US has against him. They want to bring him to the US. They want to put him on trial. So they're claiming that he conspired with a whistleblower. That's the Army intelligence analyst, Chelsea Manning, formerly Bradley Manning. They say that he illegally obtained classified information, and they want Assange to stand trial on charges under the Espionage Act and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in the US. And he could face a prison sentence of 175 years. So this is very, very serious. And I mean, I know I've just mentioned what the US claim he did, but basically we know that he's just being punished for revealing some serious war crimes and abuses. I mean, even in Amnesty International and other human rights groups have pointed out this fact. So like I said, he's currently in Belmarsh maximum security prison and fighting a legal case to stop the extradition to the US. And if he is sent to the US, I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed he will not get a fair trial. So it's also on the grounds of the way he will be treated in the US. That is another reason that we can't allow this extradition to happen.
Well, certainly, and we've seen in the case of others, and we've even seen in the case of Pakistani Dr. Itaka, who was extradited to the US, and we know the type of trial she had, the sentencing, 86 years, and I'm sure with WikiLeaks and the revelations, Julian Assange would be under severe threat. And also just looking at the importance of this case, we know that his case is important to the entire world, but also looking at Muslims in particular, and just to try and understand, Nina, as to why this case is so important to Muslims in particular.
That's right, yeah. I mean, Julian Assange, he's a journalist and a publisher. He exposed those war crimes and abuses and illegal practices of governments and corporations that we would have had no idea about if it wasn't for WikiLeaks. So he did a massive public service. And in terms of why he's relevant to Muslims, well, Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks revealed widespread abuses in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo Bay. All the torture that we know about today is because of those WikiLeaks cables. We wouldn't know so much about what went on in these places if it weren't for WikiLeaks. We wouldn't know about the Islamophobic treatment and humiliation of so many Muslims in these places, as well as rendition flights as well, because WikiLeaks did reveal this extraordinary rendition to countries which then carry out torture on people who were simply accused of or suspected of terror-related crimes, but have never been proven to be guilty. Not as though it would be justified for them to be tortured if they were proven guilty, but the point is we had no idea that this was happening. So I think this is another reason why Muslims in particular should really care about this case. And Assange also famously revealed the true motives of the US war in Afghanistan, whereby he said that it wasn't a war which was supposed to be successful, but rather it was designed to be a never-ending, perpetual war. So, like I said, we wouldn't know these things if it wasn't for him. And I think this is a good reason for Muslims to get on board and sort of try to fight for justice for him.
Yes, and also, Nina, we've seen many people, we've seen many that have written about the issues that you are speaking about, whether we're talking about Afghanistan or Iraq or, what has been taking place since 9/11 in particular. A lot has been said. And also at the same time, you mentioned Guantanamo as well, we've had people like Mohsen Beg who's come out of there, who's written a book, who's exposed a fair amount. But the level of detail that Julian Assange actually goes in his revelations and in exposing what he has. And for me, I think that is absolutely crucial. It's important because he goes in depth in these revelations.
Of course, yeah. I mean, also interestingly enough, it was like in a macabre way, it was like a gift for news outlets as well, because his WikiLeaks cables, which were giving so much of the details and the nitty-gritty and the ugly sort of secrets that were kept from us, they made massive news headlines and they sold papers as well. So it's interesting that whereas at one time Julian Assange and WikiLeaks were sort of looked upon as being heroic and sort of celebrated as kind of people who gave us truth and revealed all these things which were in the public interest to know, it's now interesting that he's actually on trial himself.
Yes. Now let's just go back. Let's look at the timeline from the time when these revelations were made. And, we know he was under threat. His life was under threat. And, going back to Sweden as well, going back right back to 2010, and we're already in 2022, 12 years later. And just to understand, some of the legal events and also looking at, from the time the arrest warrant was actually issued until now.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll take you through some of the sort of the major parts of his timeline. So as you mentioned, you had those allegations from Sweden. So this was in 2010. the Swedes issued an arrest warrant for a rape allegation and a molestation allegation. This was after he had visited Sweden on a speaking trip. And I just want to say something about these allegations. First of all, they only ever remained allegations. Secondly, I've spoken to people who are quite close to the Assange team and people who are campaigners for justice. And it's interesting that what actually happened with those claims, the rape and the molestation claim, I've heard is that the two ladies who went to the police to make this claim had actually originally gone to ask for a STD test, but were actually encouraged, and I'm telling this some off the record. This is something that a source who I think is credible told me. So those women were actually encouraged to make the accusations of the more grave, serious crimes of rape and sexual molestation. And I think, I mean, if you are such a well-known, influential and dangerous figure like Julian Assange, dangerous to power that is, it's not really completely surprising that you may be the victim of a witch hunt. So I'll just throw that in there. So just to carry on the timeline, so 2010 is when those allegations were, when the arrest warrant came about from Sweden. And he was initially he was granted bail from the High Court in London. It was his supporters who gathered, I think they fundraised £240,000 for his bail. Then you had a district judge rule that Assange should be extradited to the US the following year. That was in 2011. And then you saw this preceded Julian Assange's stay at the Ecuadorian embassy. So you may remember images of him speaking from the window and people visiting him in the embassy. So that was after the UK, the High Court decided to uphold the extradition request. So Julian Assange enters the Ecuadorian embassy in London, requesting a political asylum. And he's subject to bail conditions. He's told that he will be arrested if he breaches the conditions. Then he ends up staying in the embassy, and he says that even if those allegations against him are dropped, he'll remain in the embassy. And the reason is because he feared that the US, or there was a US extradition request underway. So I'll just fast forward a little bit. So we know that he was in the Ecuadorian embassy for quite a while. What changed was that there was a change in leadership in Ecuador, and so I guess it's not far-fetched to say that the current Ecuadorian leader was sort of more pro-USA and obviously wanting to improve that relationship and improve trade relations with the US, were happy to give Assange up. And it's also important to note that the Swedish prosecution, who, if they were doing their job properly, would have sent someone over to interview Assange in regards to those allegations made, didn't actually do their job. They didn't actually come to the embassy. They wanted him to come to Sweden. And I'd say it's because once they did that, it would be easy for them to extradite him to the USA. And I think he understood this, and that's why he was refusing to go to Sweden. But it's common practice that if the prosecution have a case against you and they want to interview you, they should come to your location. There's nothing that stops them from doing that. They could interview you over the phone, but they didn't. So that would point to the political motivation behind these allegations as well. And also what's interesting is when Donald Trump came to power in the US, obviously, I don't know if you're aware, but there was this sort of rumor, or should we say, to use Donald Trump's words, fake news about Julian Assange being a supporter of Trump, and that's why he only revealed news or cables which were damaging to Hillary Clinton, who was the Democrat leader at that time. Obviously, WikiLeaks revealed all those really damaging emails from Hillary Clinton. So Assange was frequently accused of being pro-Trump. But we know that's rubbish, because Donald Trump did nothing for him either, and actually did want him to come to the US to face trial. So where did I get? I'll just quickly bring you up to the latest sort of developments. So Julian Assange was eventually, he was arrested. I'll just get the year for you. I think it was in 2019. 2019 is when the Ecuadorian government withdrew his asylum. And they use the excuse of, they say that he repeatedly violated some international conventions and daily life protocols, which is, in my opinion, rubbish. But that was their official reason that they gave. But as I said, there was a change of government in Ecuador. So that's when the police stormed into the embassy, took Julian Assange out into a police van and took him to Belmarsh prison, where he's been ever since, and where he's been fighting this case. And I just want to throw in something about the treatment of Julian Assange too. So, because this again points to the politically motivated nature of this whole case. So in the maximum security prison, he was kept in solitary confinement for a while. He was denied medical treatment. He needed a root canal, and he was in excruciating pain, but he was denied that treatment. So this points to some kind of the punitive nature of his treatment. So this is not an ordinary case, and this is not an ordinary prisoner either. And in terms of his mental condition, there were serious concerns that he was, he suffered from depression. He was diagnosed as being suffering with autism. He was also thought to be in danger of taking his own life at one stage as well. These were things that were used in the case to keep him in the UK and not to allow the extradition to go ahead, because all of these things would have been a lot worse had he been in the USA in a maximum security prison there. So where we currently stand is that our Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has effectively given the green light now for the extradition to happen. So there's going to be a series of legal processes in the UK courts first to sort of oppose that green light that Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, gave. And if that fails, it will then go to the European Court, which is a higher authority. So that will be like the last attempt to stop this extradition. So sorry, I know I went into a lot of detail there, but that is sort of, in a nutshell, where we're at the moment.
Well, that detail was extremely important. And also, Nina, just looking at it, is he still an Australian citizen? Does he still hold an Australian passport?
He is, as far as I'm concerned, because there was, I remember one of the events that we did where somebody had asked about the Australian connection and shouldn't Australia be doing more. Yes, I believe that he still has his Australian nationality, although the Australian government haven't really done too much for him.
Well, they certainly haven't, and from what you've just described and looking at some of the timelines, whether we're talking about Ecuador, we're talking about Sweden, the United States central to this entire Julian Assange saga that is actually playing out, and I'm sure that looking at some of the implications, some of the consequences for him in the event of being extradited to the United States of America, I'm sure, you mentioned the maximum security prison, and I'm sure this could be, that is of major concern, some serious implications for him.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone thinks that he could get a fair trial in the USA, then I don't know what planet they're living on, frankly, because if he goes to the UK, the type of court he will be tried in is basically full of military personnel. The jurors that will make the decision in his case are families and relatives of people in the military. And it's important. And one thing that's will give you more insight into this. I'm not sure if you're aware, but actually it was Yahoo News revealed this story that the CIA had actually, well, they'd been spying on Julian Assange while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. But even worse, they'd actually plotted to kidnap and murder him while he was in London. So, and this is people, ex-CIA workers, people who were involved and had knowledge about this, actually came out and gave information in this expose, which Yahoo News did. So, and also, I mean, the CIA director, the former CIA director, Mike Pompeo, he's publicly labeled WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service. So, I mean, that's basically saying that WikiLeaks journalists are on par with enemy agents. So how could you then expect this man to receive a fair trial from these people? So, I mean, if he is extradited, maybe even bigger than that, it will send a very clear message that anyone who speaks truth to power will be punished for it and effectively sentenced to death. And that's another reason why we really have to try to stop the extradition.
What sort of publicity is this case getting in the UK, particularly looking at the mainstream media, Nina?
So I think things have started to improve recently, but I'm sad to say that for a long time, I don't think the media were exactly friends with Julian Assange or sympathetic to him. In the beginning, so it's an interesting trajectory. So in the beginning, of course, all these media outlets loved receiving these WikiLeaks cables because it was news for them. It was like somebody was doing their job, really. It was an investigative journalist was providing them, and whistleblowers using WikiLeaks were providing them with all these revelations and things which were in the public interest to know. So at that point, I think WikiLeaks was sort of celebrated, and Assange was seen as this heroic figure, someone who was doing service to other journalists too. But then I think post the Swedish rape allegations, you started to see the tone change. And this is where personally I think it shows the relationship between mainstream media and power, because the narrative in the media was pretty much echoing what officials in the USA and the UK who were supporting the extradition were saying about Julian Assange. And you saw a lot of negative coverage of Assange. They would try to label him as a narcissist. They were trying to character assassinate him, basically, like saying that, you know, he was this type of person and he was an unpleasant person, as if that's even relevant to what he's revealing with WikiLeaks. But then came those Swedish allegations. Now, with that, the left-wing media, in my opinion, became guilty completely, because this was. Do you remember that whole Me Too movement? That whole tide was happening at the same time. So what they did was they connected the Swedish allegations with this Me Too movement, and there was that appetite of really, I think, whereas Me Too might have started as a honourable thing, but it sort of ended up in a sort of witch hunt of men, in my opinion, and it ended up being counterproductive to the issue of women's rights in many ways. So the left-wing press, which in my opinion is sort of non-existent these days, but they then started to run those stories, run the narrative about, you know, that Assange, he must face justice in Sweden, he must be sent there, and, you know, sort of kind of there was this idea that he's guilty without even being proven to have done anything wrong. So then until recently, I think the media have been very negative. Now I've noticed that slowly there have been a few sort of more positive stories, but I do think that generally, especially with mainstream media, on the whole, it's been rather negative. And I'm speaking for the UK because I did meet other journalists from European countries who actually say that the UK media, doesn't really cover Assange and doesn't really cover WikiLeaks as much as they should be doing, and they haven't given people adequate information about the trial. And B, when they have spoken about WikiLeaks and Assange, it tended to be quite negative. So yeah, that's pretty much the way I see the media coverage of him.
Yes. Now, let's just talk about tomorrow's event. It's taking place at 6 p.m. tomorrow, the screening of Itaka. If you could just give us a bit of an insight into Itaka, because it talks about the father, it talks about the family, it talks about the fight for justice, Nina.
Of course, yeah. So first of all, I'm going to confess something. I haven't actually watched the documentary yet. Funnily enough, I was at the university today, just running around like a headless chicken, trying to sort things out for this event tomorrow. So I actually have it with me, and I will watch it tonight before the event tomorrow. But from what I know, that the film actually is a more personal story. So it follows the father of Julian Assange, a guy called John Shipton, and it's actually produced by Julian Assange's brother, and we're going to have those two in the university to talk after we show that film. So I've previously I watched the other big documentary, and we did a screening. It's called Hacking Justice, which is a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, check it out, because it gives you some really interesting exclusive footage of what life was like while Julian Assange was locked up in the Ecuadorian embassy. So it was really good to see that footage. But this one is, like I said, a more personal the journey along with the father of Julian Assange. So I think we get to see a slightly different side in this. And in regards to the work that I'm doing at the university, I'm just going to quickly do a little a pitch from my group that I work with. So what we do is, it's called ICOP. It's an acronym which means Influencing the Corridors of Power. It sounds like a big idealistic goal, and it probably is. But what we do is we try to run events, author or co-author policy briefings to try to have an influence on MPs, the members of parliament, and how they vote on particular issues. So we've done a briefing on the issue of Julian Assange's case, saying we shouldn't extradite him because of X, Y, and Z. And so this group, ICOP, that I work with, we're the ones that are arranging that event within SOAS University in London. And if anyone who's watching this is in London, I would encourage you to just come along. You'll get a chance to speak to the father and brother of Julian Assange. We also have a barrister, Estelle Dion, a barrister who's worked with some aspects of the case. So it'll be great for anyone that's interested in the legal side, interested in the personal side, and of course the politics of it, which are all intertwined. But we also have a brilliant, one of the few MPs that I actually respect, a guy called John McDonnell. He's a Labour MP, good guy, and he's going to be hosting this for us. So the plan is we're screening it tomorrow at 6 p.m. Like I said, unfortunately, and I know you're not in the country, but anyone who is, I'd welcome you to just come along, just show up at SOAS University at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
Well, I'm actually quite impressed, basically looking at it all around. And as you mentioned, you've got someone to look at it from a political perspective, a personal perspective as well, and the legal perspective. And this is extremely important in getting a thorough understanding with regard to Julian Assange in his case. But just looking at people, what can they do to help, Nina?
Okay, so I mean, there are many groups, and this one, it'll be difficult to do something in terms of global collective action. But I always think the most effective forms of activism are grassroots, in small groups, in your communities. So if you know of any groups that are supporting Assange, I'm sure in South Africa there must be a group which supports Assange. Get involved with them, see if there's anything that you can do. Do watch the documentaries, do write to your members of parliament, do write to people in government, because they're supposed to represent you. Their job is to effectively carry out your will. So if you show to them that you are against this, If you go online, you can probably find a draft of a letter that you can simply copy and paste and then address it to your local member of parliament. In this country, we have boroughs, so I would encourage people to get together with others in their boroughs, go to any events, talk to people and tell them about the case, because this happened a long time. Well, WikiLeaks was big news quite a long time ago now. A lot of young people don't know about WikiLeaks. They don't know who Julian Assange is. If you can, just have these conversations with people, just educate them, just spread the word and make them really realize that this is a very significant case, because it will set a precedent for future journalists, future whistleblowers, future publishers. He did a public service for us. WikiLeaks does a public service for us. So if he is extradited, then in the future, journalists, publishers will just be scared to reveal anything that we have a right to know, because they know that this could be their fate too.
Just finally, do we know anything about the timing of the extradition if it were to happen?
So at the moment, I've asked people on the Don't Extradite Assange campaign team about this. And it's very difficult for them to give it a timeline, because what's happened is that the Assange team, legal team, have put in an appeal now against the UK Home Secretary's decision to allow that extradition. So I've been pushing for what's the next stage, when is it? But really, it's the legal process is so complicated and can be very drawn out, which is, I think, part of the punishment too, that it just means another year maybe in prison. So when I have any information, though, I will give it to you, so you can let your viewers and listeners know. But there is a big protest planned actually for October outside the British Houses of Parliament, where we want people who support Assange to come along and just show government that he still has supporters there. But like I said, when I do know the next stages of the legal process, I'll definitely keep you informed.
Well, I must say, appreciate you taking time out, talking to us this evening here on Salam Media, being part of the show this evening. And we wish you well. We wish you well at the screening tomorrow. And as you mentioned, we certainly will stay in touch. We will follow developments as far as Julian Assange goes. And but for now, once again, we thank you. Please be well. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me again.
Nina Arif joining us out of the United Kingdom in the screening of this film tomorrow, Itaka. It is about a father, a family, a fight for justice. And this film screening will be together with a panel discussion, as Nina had mentioned, on the Julian Assange case. And with that, it's time for me to sign off once again. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you this evening. At 9 o'clock, we just want to remind our listeners that we will be doing a replay on the tribute that we had paid to Dr. Don Umar Din Matera earlier on. I must say it was a fascinating tribute, and a lot had basically come out. So that will be coming up shortly. But for now, from myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.